When someone from the Uyghur ethnic minority live streams on a Chinese platform, he can be identified and his video will be flagged. That's thanks to a technique from Chinese online platform Alibaba. The World Health Organization is set to go to Wuhan to investigate the origins of the CCP virus. Will they be successful? What is the real strength of the Chinese army? Some media reports give insight into poor management and performance levels. The U.S. charged a China-based executive of video conferencing giant Zoom for disrupting a meeting on its platform for human rights in China. And the European Union and China aim to reach an agreement. The Chinese Communist Party is making some promises on trade and investment. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. A Chinese-made software is targeting members of the Uyghur ethnic minority using facial recognition. The tech can recognize ethnicities by scanning live stream video footage. When it finds a match, the video may then be flagged for review. NTD's Don Ma has more on the story.
China's biggest cloud service provider is using software to target the country's Uyghur population. It uses facial recognition technology to scan live stream video footage and can recognize ethnic Uyghur by their facial features. When the tech singles out a match, the video may be flagged for review or removal. The information comes in a Wednesday report published by a US-based surveillance industry researcher. Research group IPVM found that Alibaba offers Uyghur facial recognition as a cloud service. The service, called Cloud Shield, allows customers to be notified when Alibaba detects a match. The Uyghur ethnic minority group originates from Central and East Asia. The group is native to the Xinjiang Autonomous Region in northwest China. Alibaba specializes in e-commerce and technology. It's the fourth biggest cloud service provider in the world. The company says Cloud Shield is used for content security. It can reportedly recognize spam and terrorism in videos. But IPVM found that Cloud Shield also features the ability to detect facial features in detail. That includes features indicating gender, age, race, whether the face is smiling or not, and whether they match the specific facial profile of a Uyghur. Alibaba told IPVM that these features were only used within a testing environment. But Alibaba never explained why it would need to test facial recognition for specific ethnicities. IPVM also found no signs that the Uyghur detection technology was only used as a test. Alibaba's cloud division is widely seen as a Chinese version of US-based tech giant Amazon's Web Services. It claims to have more than 3 million customers internationally and a reported $5.6 billion in sales for 2020. In another report by IPVM, Chinese telecom company Huawei was also found to be targeting Uyghurs. IPVM discovered in a document that Huawei had worked with Megvii, one of China's largest facial recognition providers. Together, they were reportedly testing facial recognition software with the ability to target Uyghurs. The document, labeled confidential, is an interoperability test report. It reveals that Huawei gave Megvii's recognition software a seal of approval. That's after it passed its testing phase. IPVM says that the report further proves that many Chinese facial recognition companies are involved in the Chinese Communist Party or CCP's efforts to suppress Uyghurs. It's estimated that more than 1 million Uyghurs have been detained in China's Xinjiang re-education camps. IPVM also found evidence that the country's top 3 largest video surveillance manufacturers have all been involved in Uyghur identification and tracking. The report identified Hikvision, Dahua, and Uniview. The research group also found over a dozen Chinese police departments using the same facial recognition software. This is Don Ma reporting, NTD News.
Chinese authorities detain a former New York Times photographer and author of anti-communist books. NTD's Becky Zhou has the story.
Photographer Du Bing disappeared in Beijing on Wednesday morning. Police confirmed his detention to his sister, Du Jirong.
He is now being detained by public security officials in Daxing for no specific reason. He's accused of the so-called picking quarrels and provoking trouble. He didn't have a pass, so he had to stay at home all the time. Recently, he did nothing that would trigger an arrest.
According to a website that advocates for human rights in China, police questioned Du repeatedly this year. China's National Security Agency also demanded that he delete his social media posts, but he explained he'd rather let officials do it and promised to stop using Twitter. Du's friend Hu Jia, another human rights activist in Beijing, said Du often commented on sensitive topics online, including China's 1989 Tiananmen massacre and torture practices inside labor camps. His remarks and books angered Beijing, leading to his repeated arrest. Du was first arrested in 2013 after filming a documentary on China's Masanja labor camp. Hu pointed out that Beijing would use the holiday season, when Western countries put less focus and pressure on China, to arrest even more dissidents. Hu has published 10 books. One of them, titled Seas of Changchun, is a historical account of communist troops locking down a Chinese city to defeat enemies in the 1940s. At least 160 civilians died. Du's new book on communist leader Vladimir Lenin's experiments with communist theory may be available in Taiwan next month. Reporting by Becky Zhou, NTD News.
The World Health Organization, or WHO, is leading an international mission to investigate the origins of the virus in China in January. A team of international experts are preparing to visit Wuhan to examine evidence, including human and animal samples. A Danish member of the team said the trip to China would last 6 weeks, including 2 weeks of quarantine on arrival. A WHO expert in animal diseases said the investigators would like to interview market workers about how they contracted the virus. Since the start of the pandemic, Beijing has been under pressure from Western countries to allow an international inquiry into the virus origins. The communist regime has strongly opposed calls for an international inquiry, saying such calls are anti-China. Australia called for a global inquiry into China's handling of the virus outbreak in April. China has since restricted import of Australian coal, meat, sugar, barley, cotton, timber, wine, and lobsters in retaliation. Now we turn to China's army, known as the People's Liberation Army, or PLA. This year, the Chinese Communist Party's top leader kept repeatedly speaking about preparing for war. Chinese media outlets have also increased reporting about the PLA's advancements and equipment. But some media reports give us a closer look into the Chinese Army's comparatively poor management and soldiers' ability levels. Army publication PLA News reported about a new type of cannonball firing test for soldiers. During the test, each soldier would fire cannonball ammunition on a practice field. Their performance would then be assessed. The article emphasized that no personnel from the equipment manufacturing company were present. That's after another field assessment earlier this year. At that time, each tank was accompanied by personnel from the manufacturer when firing cannonballs. That's because soldiers didn't have enough knowledge of the gear. The report also explained that during the November assessment, soldiers also had opportunities to test their problem-solving skills. It went on to describe one such test. After pressing the launch button, the cannonball didn't launch out of the barrel. Soldiers then had to manually check the system. After a time, they again tried to launch the shell and were successful. Based on the report, the issue seemed to have been caused by faulty equipment. Another article from PLA News described how one Army officer overcame difficulties to fulfill his duties. That's in an effort to procure equipment for China's military. Mr. Wei from the Army Equipment Department was tasked with choosing the best out of over 10 domestic weapon suppliers. In the face of stacks of product information and a large amount of complex data, he reportedly found it difficult to make a decision. That's until he visited a troop of soldiers for an equipment acceptance meeting. There, he discovered soldiers care little for parameters, but instead focus on the weapon's practical use. He then came up with the idea to test the equipment on a training field. After a firing competition with all suppliers present, he chose the best one based on performance. The report praised Wei for the new effective way of finding the best weapons, but it also shows that before Wei, the PLA had failed to perform physical verification work for its gear. It's commonly known that bribery takes center stage when the Chinese army chooses its sales and weapons suppliers, meaning weapons performance on the battlefield may be a main concern for Wei, but accepting bribes to line their pockets appears to be a more pressing concern for some of his colleagues. The report continued to describe other long-term problems that Wei solved, like air conditioning systems inside tanks that don't perform well, causing temperatures inside the vehicles to soar. Other problems include tanks being too slow to start when operated in low temperatures. The article praised Wei for solving the problems, but revealed basic quality problems have plagued the PLA for an extended time, and no one sought to fix them. Earlier this month, another article pointed a spotlight toward the seemingly poor skills on the PLA's technical staff. According to the report, an information and communication group under the Strategic Support Department deployed a new type of satellite communication vehicle some years ago. But none of the team's members understood how to operate it. As a result, one soldier who had achieved just a high school diploma spent a week learning how to use it. The report raises a number of questions, like why the manufacturer didn't train troops on how to use the new equipment. Displaying yet another common problem caused by China's frequent military bribery, after ensuring the sale of the gear, manufacturers take little care to ensure the quality and performance of the gear later on. As for other pressing questions, why wouldn't the PLA recruit professionals or those with relevant technical backgrounds to operate complex equipment? Instead of allowing soldiers with high school level education to teach themselves about the gear from scratch. The Trump administration is adding dozens of Chinese companies to a trade blacklist for their alleged ties to the military, effectively cutting them off from U.S. technology. In total, it targets 60 Chinese companies. This includes the country's top chipmaker, SMIC, meaning the company will need to have a special license from the Commerce Department before a U.S. supplier can send goods to it. SMIC has repeatedly said it has no ties to China's military, but it's already been in Washington's crosshairs. Last month, the Defense Department effectively banned Americans from being able to buy shares in the chipmaker from late next year. The new move could have a big impact on SMIC, as the company relies heavily on American technologies to manufacture chips. Companies already on the list include the telecoms giant Huawei and the maker of surveillance cameras, Hikvision. Now we look to Canada. Early this year, the U.S. Defense Department blacklisted a Chinese state-owned oil company over its association with the regime's military. But in Canada, this company has already gained a strong presence. China National Offshore Oil Corporation, or CNOOC, is China's third largest oil and gas producer. The company has established a solid foundation in Canada, going far beyond oil sands. The company maintains a shale gas operation, a power station, and wind farm in the country. CNOOC also made a big splash in 2012 when it bought Calgary-based company Nixon for $15 billion. But over the years, CNOOC has failed to keep its promises to retain Nixon's original management teams and employees. It has replaced senior Canadian staff with Chinese nationals and laid off workers. After the U.S. Defense Department added the company to a list of entities with Chinese military ties, CNOOC's Canadian stock dropped like a rock, plunging from about $160 a share to below $120 starting in late November. Two more Chinese firms, China Petroleum and Chemical Corporation and China National Petroleum Corporation, have also made significant purchases in Canada's energy sector. The U.S. charged a China-based executive of the video conferencing giant Zoom for allegedly disrupting meetings commemorating the Tiananmen Square crackdown hosted on Zoom. NTD's Juliet Song has more details.
On Friday, U.S. prosecutors charged a Chinese executive of video conferencing giant Zoom. His crime is allegedly helping the Chinese regime censor Zoom's American users. One of the Zoom users who was censored said it's an important breakthrough.
This is very uplifting news. It really cheers me up.
The Justice Department didn't reveal the company's name in its announcement, but Zhou confirmed that the FBI told him the charge over the phone after the announcement was released. Also, during the past several months, Zhou has been providing the FBI with information about the Zoom censorship incident.
The FBI agents and I had many conversations about this, both over the phone and face-to-face interviews.
Zhou was referring to an incident this May. At the time, he helped co-organize an online event hosted on Zoom. The event was to commemorate June 4, 1989. On this day, Chinese troops moved into Tiananmen Square and fired at unarmed protesters asking for democracy. The topic remains taboo in China. Zhou is now one of the survivors and is now in the U.S. He said a survivor who's still in China joined the meeting as well. That person was arrested after the meeting and later released. But a week after the meeting, at the request of the Chinese regime, Zoom shut down their account. And the person who's now charged is the one who helped shut down their account. His name is Jin Xinjiang. He's the main contact person between Zoom and Chinese intelligence officials. If China wants to end certain virtual meetings hosted on Zoom, Jin is one of the persons they go to. The Justice Department said Jin and others ended 4 Zoom meetings commemorating the Tiananmen Square massacre this year. He also provides China with Zoom users' information, and in some cases, names and email addresses of Zoom's overseas users. He's based in China. Zhou Fengshuo, one of the Zoom users that was censored, said the FBI told him there would be new developments in the case. Reporting by Juliet Song, NTD News.
The U.S. is banning electric utilities from buying certain power equipment from China. That's if they supply power to critical defense facilities. The Secretary of Energy issued the order on Thursday. It's designed to reduce the risk China poses to our bulk power systems, or BPS. These power systems are vital to the nation's energy security and national defense, among others. The equipment is used in substations, control rooms, power plants, including nuclear reactors. The Department of Energy says it believes China is equipped and actively planning to undermine the nation's BPS. The order takes effect on January 16th. The United States is warning Pacific Island nations to steer clear of Chinese telecom company Huawei Marine. That's after the company offered to build an undersea internet cable in the region for a cut-price bid.
The U.S. has taken its campaign against Chinese telecoms underwater. Washington has warned Pacific Island nations against accepting a cut-price offer to build an undersea internet cable in the Pacific from China's Huawei Marine. It's a nearly $73 million project, bankrolled in part by the World Bank, designed to give an internet boost to Nauru, Micronesia, and Kiribati. Another of the countries involved, Nauru, has also signaled concern, although the third, Kiribati, has taken a more favorable approach after establishing formal diplomatic ties with China last year. Chinese telecoms companies have come under scrutiny abroad, especially giant Huawei Technologies. U.S. President Donald Trump's administration has pressured allies to squeeze the company out of future infrastructure projects. Huawei actually divested Huawei Marine earlier this year, but it's still a Chinese company and required by law to cooperate with Beijing's intelligence and security services. The cable project could be especially risky for Washington. According to plans, it would connect to another undersea cable used primarily by the U.S. government, which lands at the U.S. territory of Guam, an important base for the military. Huawei Marine's bid came in at more than 20% below rivals, and that low cost puts it in a good position to win. But the project is now at an impasse, according to the sources, as the countries and agencies involved fail to agree on the best way forward.
Now we turn to the European Union. The EU and China aim to reach an investment accord by the end of the year. German and EU officials said the agreement would further open up the Chinese market for Europeans. The negotiations for this deal were launched in 2014 but stalled for years. A topic among others is, as the EU says, unfairness in trade, such as China's restrictions on European investment and subsidies for Chinese firms. China already has broad access to the EU market. The EU has been demanding China to provide European countries with equivalent access to Chinese markets. On Friday, a German government spokesman said China appeared more committed to reaching a deal. An EU official told Reuters China fears being isolated from the West as the United States steps up its trade war with Beijing, and Brussels has taken steps to monitor Chinese investment in strategic European sectors more closely. A senior Western diplomat in Beijing told Reuters China is asking impossible things for openings for Chinese investment in Europe in sectors that are not open to anyone, such as energy, water treatment, and public utilities. Now we turn to Africa, where the Chinese Communist Party has been collecting data from African politicians for years. This, according to an exclusive Reuters report. Before the African Union's annual Leaders Summit earlier this year, technicians discovered Chinese hackers were stealing footage from their own surveillance cameras. The security breach occurred at the African Union headquarters in Ethiopia's capital. It was done by a Chinese hacking group nicknamed Bronze President. The hijacked cameras covered African Union offices, parking areas, corridors, and meeting rooms. The alert was drafted in late January and circulated to senior officials. Chinese workers built the related conference center, including security cameras, in 2012. Chinese technicians still help maintain the organization's digital infrastructure. Both the African Union and Beijing denied the report at the time. Chinese officials said Africa and China are good friends, partners, and brothers, adding that China would never interfere in Africa's internal affairs. But a former African Union official said the news was accurate and had put officials there on high alert over cyber espionage. Back in 2018, a French newspaper reported that African Union employees made a disturbing discovery. They found the servers at the new conference center were sending copies of their contents to Shanghai every night, and that listening devices had been installed inside the building. And that's all for today's China In Focus. Thanks for watching and see you soon.